Great. Well, good afternoon, and thank you so much for coming here. I'm excited about this panel. My name is Jackie Gilchrist. I'm with Gale, which is the library publishing division of Cengage. And the origins of this panel are actually a session at last year's Charleston, which was focused on research impact. And it ended with a question, I think, from a librarian at the University of Sydney who asked, "This is great, what about the humanities?" And Evan was part of that panel, and everyone kind of went, yeah, I don't know, it's really hard. So we thought we would try and address some of those questions. We do know that traditional metrics like citations continue to dominate, but in the humanities, even those are very challenging. It's hard to measure the basic bibliometric data. It's arguably less relevant, and teaching measurements are harder still. And as with other disciplines, citations do overlook broader societal contributions. So what I wanted to do with the panelists, thank you all, is to get practical today and look at how do we define, how do we measure, and how do we communicate humanities' impact when traditional citation metrics just don't tell the full story. Before we introduce the panelists, I just wanted a quick audience show of hands, just kind of understand your focus around measuring humanities' impact. Is it research? Who's interested in looking at the research impact of the humanities? Yep, a few. Teaching? A few more. Student outcomes? A couple. Policy? Some. Community, cultural impact. So there's many different dimensions we can go down. So before we dive into those dimensions, I'd love to meet our panelists. They bring very different perspectives to this conversation. So if you could introduce yourselves quickly, just your name, your job title, your institution, and your professional connection to the concept of impact. About 20 seconds each. So Evan, if you want to kick us off.
Hi, Evan Simpson, Associate Dean for Experiential Learning and Academic Engagement at Northeastern University. Mainly involved in the impact question as a result of advocacy around open access and the value of open access publishing in our campus community. This has led to questions about impact and prompted me to try and dive a little further in over the course of the last couple of years.
Right.
Willa Liber-Tavernier. I'm the Research Impact and Open Scholarship Librarian at Indiana University Bloomington, so I'm frequently consulted by faculty, library administration, or units and departments across the campus or across the university for bibliometric data to support various decision-making processes.
I'm Jeremy Katz, Research Impact Librarian at Florida State University, and similar to Willa, I support individual faculty units and the broader university as a whole in finding metrics and supporting impact across campus.
Yep. And last but not least, joining us from Zoom.
Hi, I'm Holly Yu. I'm the head of collections, discovery, and content management at California State University, Los Angeles. I have been focusing on my research on library curation, assessment, and impact, and the campus partnership to conduct a consistent, sustainable assessment on libraries' impact on student success.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. So we want to start with the why and what the purpose of evaluation and measurement is. Do current research evaluation practices in the humanities, are they for career advancement, or do they align with societal goals? So Willa, I'm hoping you can get us started, and Evan, jump in, maybe?
So research evaluation tends to pop up in three broad areas: funding, hiring, and promotion. It's important to note that the things that are being looked for is quality. You want to ensure that you have excellent research that's solid and that's trustworthy. But it's also used for the purpose of decision making at scale. when you have lots of applicants across those areas that I spoke about. In terms of current practices, in the US, there's no countrywide standard for research evaluation or research assessment, unlike, for example, in the UK where you have the Research Excellence Framework. So current practices in the US tend to center around citation-based metrics for evaluation. So number of citations, a scholar's H index, and also the journal impact factor of the journals where they publish. So all of these citation-based metrics, it's important to note that they emerged in the 60s and 70s, post-World War II, where there was an explosion of scientific output as aids for libraries to navigate the growing corpus of research, to help with discovery and evaluation at scale. They were not meant to evaluate individual scholars. The transformation came later as competitiveness grew to use these things to evaluate individual scholars. But that's not what they were designed for, but they still hold primacy. Recently, a scholar told to me, and this was just a couple of weeks ago, a scholar told me that they have to publish in a certain set of very high impact journals, or they will not get awards and they won't get grant funding. So that shifted from something to help you discover good research to something that determines your career as a scholar or a scientist. So that shifts now from a preoccupation with good research to getting good numbers. So that's where the shift has come in. It's also not, in addition to not being designed for that, when you look at the tenure clock, which is 6 years, and then you look at the humanities, where longitudinal studies have shown that around 50% of humanities citations accrue after the 10-year mark, you see a mismatch there already. And they are also designed for article-based disciplines, so they don't do well in measuring disciplines where community engagement, performance, or that are book-based disciplines, all of which is what the humanities is about.
Well said. I can add on to that. I mean, I think there's clearly inherent good in measuring impact. We're all here in this room to make an impact, help people solve problems, publishers, vendors, librarians, practitioners. There's clearly inherent good in measuring impact and understanding the impact our researchers or institutions have, but there is incentive, right, around personal brand, institutional brand, department and program brand, right? We increase retention, recruitment, we attract more funding when we can demonstrate impact. So there is actually a lot at stake that goes beyond understanding the inherent good we all know we're in this room for, to work towards. There is a lot at stake for researchers and for institutions to be able to answer the question of how we demonstrate and show the impact that our scholarship has on the real world. So make no mistake, I think there's deep incentive there, again, around personal brand, but institutional brand as well, and those are certainly drivers for solving these problems.
All right, so we know that in the humanities, like as Willa and Evan discussed, that impact often unfolds outside of journal citations. So it might be in blogs, on podcasts, in books, across classrooms, in policies, the cultural economy, community life, and so on. But let's try and define what we actually mean by impact here. So we hear this term real-world impact every single day. And it would be good to try and work towards a workable definition that maybe people can adapt or adopt on campus. So, Evan, what does it mean to you?
Sure, we use the phrase a lot in these conversations, beyond citations, and I think it's very clear that we are still actually talking about citations. Where we look for those citations matters, though. And I think when we talk about real-world impact, we're talking about actually implementable things that are being implemented in the real world. And of course, we're looking for evidence of that implementation, of that citation back to our institution, to our scholars, in those real-world projects. So think of white papers, think of the kinds of things that Overton indexes, coherent digital indexes. Those are exactly the kind of documents in gray literature where we will find citations, hopefully, to some of the work that our scholars have done, including those in the humanities. But looking beyond citations, of course, again, back to the fundamental definition is just any evidence of implementation of an idea, right, that is towards some actual solution in the real world. I know that's a lot of words, but there's no better way to say it. There's probably a pithier way, yes, but I think that's really the essence of what we're talking about when we're talking about real world impact. There's a lot of work to be done here. I think in the STEM fields, we can rest on those traditional citation frameworks to determine impact. Think about drug discovery, right? The drug is discovered, right? There is a factual set of evidence that gets put together and published, right? It's a fact that these drugs will do something. And the real world impact of that is in how many lives are saved, right? And the kind of data that hospitals and other medical facilities collect. But for the humanities, right? Finding that correlative or even causal or even correlative connections to impact is much more elusive. So we have to push for better coding, right, of the types of mentions we see to scholarship in the real world literature, in those white papers, in that great literature. So sometimes it's a direct citation, sometimes it's a mention that is not, we might not consider to be a citation, right? And so there is a lot of work involved in uncovering what exactly the white paper or gray literature is saying about the scholarship that it may have used in solving some kind of problem. This is not easy to do and not easy to do systematically. We need to interrogate some of those real world projects by asking questions, right? Asking questions of the people who implemented the solution about what they used and what they drew from. They may not always write about it or cite it like we are hoping they will, right? We can also do a better job inside of our institutions to make sure that we are citing or asking our partners within our institutions to cite the work of their partners in creating policies. So at Northeastern, we have a set of artificial intelligence policies that have been rolled out, and a number of faculty have contributed to those. How will that be captured, right, as impact within our institution?
And I think Holly, so I'm looking at the screen, but actually I should be looking at the camera at the back of the room. Holly, did you want to jump in as well? And it's time for the bingo of you're on mute.
Yes. As everyone just mentioned, the only thing that I would like to add is as the research going on, they are involved into the areas that where the local knowledge is created. And on our campus, we are from humanities research into using all those primary sources to discover local content, and from there, and we create local specialized, like focused archive and special collections for the community.
Okay, Jeremy, Willa, do you want to add anything else? So you're good. Okay. So you've talked about citations as being an important but imperfect metric. And at Gale, we know that we have a citation issue where we often see researchers are misciting primary sources. We see that they are citing the original source work because rather than the digital database, for example. But that's not the only reason that bibliometrics might fall short in the humanities. Willa, can you expand on maybe some other areas in which you see them as an imperfect measure?
Yes. So one of the things I spoke about was these being built for articles. So humanities scholarship, it often relies on the books, the performances, the community engagement, and it's not always a direct link to show that this performance resulted in this thing that we're trying to measure. Because a lot of the expansion is still about citing the thing. Now, the bibliometric databases, they very heavily privilege STEM fields and hard sciences.
And journals.
And journals yep. Over everything else. But there's other things. There's also an English language bias. And there's also a bias for publications, journals that publish for a general audience, or what they would call broad impact to the detriment of publishers who might be looking at things that are very, very important at a local or regional level. Those aren't indexed as well in bibliometric databases. So you do have that bias, but there have been improvements in the system in that many institutions recognize that the bibliometric databases don't serve these other areas well. So there's a lot of conversations that have been happening. There's a lot of principles that have been put forward and also processes for how we might do this differently. So we have initiatives like the Declaration on Research Assessment, Leader Manifesto, Humetrics HSS. There's also a Hong Kong manifesto, and then there are models like the Becker model for research assessment in the medical sciences, and also the INORMS, the scope framework, which is here's how you ought to do the process of research evaluation. So all of them are recognizing that you can't rely on simplistic metrics. You have to be context specific when you're doing research evaluation, which is really important for the humanities. And you have to combine appropriate qualitative judgment and narrative evaluation with responsible use of metrics and numerical indicators. So it's this recognition that evaluation should take many forms, that there's probably not going to be one solution because it has to be context specific. It's calling for, and we're seeing a bit of a change in how we value and evaluate research contributions, which is promising, but we're just not there yet.
Right.
I just want to quickly add, I think context specific is such a great phrase for this, and I often think that humanities impact is better told in stories than it is with data, or we may have more opportunity to tell it in stories than we will with data. It's, again, that data, that causal or correlative impact is elusive for the humanities.
Right. Jeremy, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I'll also add, Evan, you mentioned, we have to wait for the traditional databases to catch up in how they measure these things. And you mentioned gray literature as well. A lot of these databases track media mentions and their metrics, and that's a great way to capture humanities impact. But a lot of those media mentions only capture the reference if it includes a DOI in the article, in the media. So, that's, most media conglomerates are not going to include a DOI there. So we have to, push them to do a better job of capturing those references.
Anything else? Anyone want to add?
That's all for now, yeah.
Okay. So we did say we wanted to get practical. So let's move on to, unless Holly, you want to jump in? Okay. So let's move on to that very elusive how. I'd love to talk a little bit about what we can actually measure today that might be practical in the next 6 to 12 months. If we start with research, I'd love to hear what approaches you're using that evidence or demonstrate research impact on the humanities that maybe some of the audience might be doing already or might want to consider. So Jeremy, do you want to get started?
Yeah, FSU has a really great fine arts programs all across campus. We have great dance programs, musical theater, fine arts, and music programs. So something I'm trying to do in my role is figure out how we can demonstrate the impact of those programs. We have many faculty who don't have traditional scholarly outputs at all. For example, we have College of Music faculty who travel the world performing operatic pieces. And, there's real world cultural impact from those performances. And we want to find better ways to account for those. So something we're doing is we've just started working with the College of Music on campus to map what faculty are doing, both nationally, internationally, around the world, to perform all over. We're using ArcGIS story maps to visualize that those outputs Even calling them outputs feels a little incorrect. I don't know the right way to put that, but hopefully that will be a way we can show that our fine arts faculty are really contributing out in the world. We've also been talking with the College of Music about mapping where their teaching graduates are going. So the music program at FSU also educates a lot of the music teachers in Florida and around the country. We'd love to map where those students are going. It's been a little bit of a struggle getting that data from the Department of Education in Florida for various reasons, but that's something we're interested in as well, and would go a long way in showing FSU's impact around the country. So that's what we're doing at FSU. I mentioned media mentions. Hopefully, the traditional databases will start doing a better job there. Hopefully some cross-disciplinary citation studies can happen. Gail is doing some primary sources research in STEM and social sciences in that area. Also building interactive impact dashboards. So dashboards that combine alt metrics. Usage data is a big one. I think repositories are starting to get a lot better in terms of showing what material in those repositories is being used for and who is downloading and looking at that material. And then, Evan, I think you had some info on Northeastern as well.
Yeah, so we at Northeastern recently licensed a couple resources that help us look at some of that gray literature. And so some of our explorations there do show some possibilities. Some of our researchers in game design, for instance, are prolific writers and researchers. We can see through some of our explorations that that research does get cited in policy documents and decisions made in real world implementation in K through 12 settings. How those citations, quote unquote, manifest are wildly different. And so sometimes it's a direct citation and sometimes it's a citation to Northeastern University, and we have to figure out what might be within that by snooping around and figuring out what else that writer may have cited. So thinking about the networks there is important. So far that does seem to be a fruitful path, but again, difficult to systematize this kind of exploration. And so what we find ourselves doing is gravitating more and more towards some of our community engagement initiatives where faculty have been heavily involved in creating really immersive experiences for students and community members. And at the heart of some of those experiences is the preservation of documents and other collections that those community organizations hold. So you can imagine all the different components that go into these projects, from just engaging with that community organization to getting them comfortable with a bunch of Northeastern students being in their space, to understanding what kind of assets they have, through the digitization, preservation, and ultimately curation, discoverability pipeline. There's a lot of faculty that have been intimately involved in all of those steps, and we are trying to think about ways we can manifest that or represent that in ways that the institution can see in how they may evaluate those faculty in TNP and beyond. So some of our explorations at Northeastern.
So when you're looking at, you cited overusing the word citation. You talked about the game designers and kind of, are you manually tracking those down? Are you using AI? Who's doing that work? How's it being recorded?
Informally, it's being recorded informally. It's an informal exploration. We search for mentions of Northeastern University in that gray literature, and then see if a specific work or faculty member was cited. Sometimes the institution is not mentioned, but it's the faculty member that's mentioned, and sometimes it's the name of the article that the faculty member has published without a mention of the faculty member's name. So you can see there's so many different ways that this spins out once you get into that database and find something to investigate further. Again, I can't emphasize enough, really difficult to make this process efficient and systematic, which is why, again, gravitating sometimes towards stories can sometimes be very effective in communicating the impact of humanities scholarship.
Okay, so you haven't found the magic ChatGPT AI?
Unfortunately, we have not, Jackie, right. But we are waiting for that solution. Okay. So please, yeah, let us know when you've got that.
Does anybody else, Holly, Willa, Jeremy, anything else you want to add in terms of tangible examples of tracking research impact?
I'll just add, we've, in measuring the College of Music's impact, we've had to talk to their travel department, their marketing department, telling the story. Those campus partners have been really, really helpful in gathering the data and the impact of what the College of Music is doing.
Okay. Willa, you want to add anything?
We've just been.
Yep.
I've just been in my work with faculty, just using multiple ways, like tracking books holdings across libraries and the geographic distribution of that, getting attendance numbers. I saw a really good suggestion on an ARL listserv to link this to science that shows the impact of music and art on individual well-being and societal well-being.
Interesting. Holly, anything you want to add from a research perspective?
Not at this point.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I did put a link in the chat to some of the work that Gail's been doing with the University of Sheffield iSchool. And the idea was that libraries could perhaps replicate some of those methods for their own research where humanities researchers may be misciting, well-intentioned, but misciting the works. So impact also shows up in student success. And that brings in questions around feasibility and ethics. And Holly's done quite a lot of research on this. I also put a link to her articles in the chat. So the question is, how can libraries help define meaningful student impact? So Holly, you want to jump in?
Sure, thank you. I will start with the advocating for standardized data collection. So a few years ago, our library started doing a correlational study that we primarily using the easy proxy logging data and the circulation data from the library. Those are the data there in existence. The study demonstrated a strong positive relationship between library use and the student GPA and the retention. Of course, those are correlational, not causal. And these results showed that the potential of systematic and quantitative assessment when data is properly integrated. During the study, and we found a few challenges. And first of all, it's inconsistent data collection. And from library to library, we surveyed the literature. We find that there are a lot of inconsistencies, and there are also data name ambiguity. Then there is lack of interoperability between library and the campus systems, such as like a campus institutional research. And in the article, we did conduct a very broad literature review of similar studies and provided a list of metrics that has been collected by library doing this type of research, including both the data that all libraries collect inside the library and the data points outside of the library. And these are the two tables listed in the published article that you can reference to. So each of those metrics that library collected, in order to run correlational studies, you really needed to have a unique identifier to connect to campus student demographic data data source and also student academic performance data source. So those are, we need to, when we're collecting data, we need to think about it, how we are going to run this kind of study and what data points it's critical that we needed to collect. So there are some feasibilities, for example, as we did, and using existing data like easy proxy logins, where you have the username, right? And for circulation transactions, where you have student ID. So these are the two like unique identifiers can be used to run analysis between the library use and the student performance and the student demographic data source. So we pushed very hard, we're not there yet, to establish a minimal data standards to develop a baseline sort of for annual library data collection, in addition to, the existing easy proxy data, circulation transaction data. So that way we can ensure consistent, sustainable impact assessment. And the second thing I wanted to say is the privacy and interoperability challenges. For our research, and it required for campus institutional review board IRB approval, and to ensure that the data that we receive from the analysis exclude personal identifier. This model can be really used in ethically navigating privacy when still producing actionable insight. So the key here is when our campus institutional research come back with their analysis for us, they excluded all personal identifiers, they give us aggregated data instead of individual student data. So there are also interoperability barriers, too many of them. In our study, we observe many library systems right now, like what we are using in AMA and Primo VE, are not designed to integrate with the student learning analytics and the campus institutional research platforms or systems. So we are trying to establish campus partnership to creating those shared standards, and so we can connect library data to institutional systems such as learning management system, student learning analytics, and even student course registration and bookstore systems as well. So we are working on it. There are a lot of challenges along the way. Also, it is very important that we partner with campus IT and institutional research offices, so to bridge off these gaps. So also we wanted to rethink matrix, maybe collecting more meaningful data. In our study, we did collect instructional data, and the instructional data that the library conduct a lot of information literacy instructional classes. We wanted to run analysis as well, but it was sort of advised by campus institutional research that the course data, it's so vastly different. There are, first of all, upper division and lower division courses and the different kind of assignments. And so the library instruction, it's really varies, and the resource used varies. So we are still, even though we collected the data, but we cannot use that data at this point until we figure out how we can best to categorize the instructional data that we collected. That might be an article 2 in the future. And also we are thinking how we can assess student progress in research and critical thinking, and how we can assess their lifelong learning skills, and how we can assessing library instruction in preventing course withdrawals. We have some students, if they cannot do a class assignment, they would just withdraw from class. So how can library sort of engage in this identification and support at a risk student? And also, we wanted to look at societal and equity outcomes, explore library services and resource use related to these areas. And for California State University, Los Angeles, we are a very diverse urban campus, and with 85% of our students from historically underserved communities. So library's impact must frame in terms of empowerment and access, not just academic scores, right? So we have a lot of role to play. So one thing that we wanted to do is to sort of partner with campus student success team to embed research consultation to the student learning analytics. So far, we are in step 1. We have successfully connected student learning analytics with library research consultation. So from there, student can schedule appointment with a research consultant or their subject librarians for to schedule their research appointment to come over to library or do it over the phone or Zoom online. So those are kind of things can lead library to make sort of like a real-time contribution to student success. So we feel from this experience, the library is uniquely positioned to advocate for cross-campus data partnership that integrating student learning and with library services and resources and other campus services. And the next point I try to make is based on the campus's vision of student success, that including academic achievement, engagement, retention, equitable access to learning resources. So we needed to establish like ongoing, not one-time integration of library and institutional data to support sustainable assessment and intervention. So also we can leverage our findings to influence the campus priorities and the policy inclusion of the library in student success. So we are not sort of like afterthought in a lot of cases. So my final thought is, so the path forward is not sort of collect more data, but collect the right data responsibly for collaborative and sustainable assessment. Thank you.
Thank you. And Jeremy and Willa, I know that your job title is Research Impact Librarian, but have any of you been doing any work in terms of measuring student outcomes in the humanities, or is that just not on the roadmap yet? Evan? Okay.
We love grades, right? It's hard to measure experience. Part of my title is experiential learning. Northeastern is known as an institution that students do co-ops, so they get real-world experience, hopefully making an impact. And again, we have a number of community engagement initiatives through and formal service learning opportunities. We know that those experiences are building blocks towards those students being able to solve problems later in life. It is difficult outside of that framework to really get at what the impact is. Right.
Totally. All right, so we would love some takeaways from you. So you've put out there lots of ideas, concepts, some things which are actually happening. Of all the strategies that you've discussed, could you each pick one that you believe is the most effective or the most promising or that you're most excited about within your own institution? And we talked earlier about the importance of context. So acknowledge and appreciate that that would be within your own institutional context, but I'd still love to hear recommendations from each of you.
I can start this off. Again, to be context specific in research evaluation, use multiple ways of demonstrating value and impact, not just relying on metrics. Let the metrics serve the scholar's story and not dominate it. And keep advocating towards the broader campus, because I think there's a growing recognition and interest in this.
Okay.
Yeah, for me, it's the mapping project, the geospatial mapping project that we're working on. You know, FSU, I think at the upper levels realizes that one of the things that makes our university unique is It was founded as a women's college, and as a result, our arts programs and humanities are very strong. And so finding ways to highlight those and show their community impact, their broader national and international impact is important to our university. And so that's something I'm excited that we're working towards.
And are you using any specific software? And again, is it rolling up sleeves? Is it, an AI generated effort? How is this working?
We haven't used any AI yet. I mentioned, we've gotten data from the College of Music, Marketing, and Travel departments, and we've myself and my employee have been inputting that into our GIS story maps, that it helps that our university has access to our GIS at our university. And so, we've been plugging that in there, and it's a nice way to tell a story of the impact of the College of Music.
I'm so glad this conversation was geared towards output and looking at what is the output of our scholarship and our institutions. Real world impact is hard to define. And again, humanities, correlation, causal impact, elusive. I think it's okay to drift back to inputs. We're really good at the inputs in libraries. We provide so many of them. And there's an ecosystem that we should remember we are kind of part of gardening or tending to. And that involves advocacy on a number of fronts. So one of our goals should be, to make humanities research more discoverable, to expand the readership, which of course increases the chances that it will be used in some real world solution. This is what we're really good at: discoverability, indexing, things like that. So we should really push for publishers, vendors, to include more humanities works. We should be pushing in the read and publish transformative agreements we strike to include monograph publishing in that. We should be pushing within our institutions to consider community engagement, experiential learning and other kinds of experience-based, community-based work that scholars are doing as being truly impactful things. And we talk about student outcomes, but sometimes those efforts also help the institution build new buildings. We have a master plan. Northeastern has a master plan in Boston. We have to have that master plan approved by the city. And guess what they ask us when we go to those zoning board calls or those city councilor calls is they ask, what impact are you having on the community? So it's really good, not just for the library, but for across the institution, for us to be able to talk about where faculty and students are contributing to the good of the community. And that's real world impact that pays back to the institution's future in building more dorms, building more research facilities, et cetera. So it's okay to drift back to inputs. We are really good at those inputs, and we can do a lot with them. Last thing I'll say is pushing more development of a deeper coding and almost sentiment analysis, citation analysis to figure out where our institutions are being mentioned, outside of those very formal citation networks that we all would love to be everywhere, but they're not everywhere. People are not citing resources like we are doing inside the scholarly community. So thinking about some of the work that Coherent Digital is doing, Overton Index is doing, keep pushing those vendors to do more of that work is something that we can do.